Ann Bergstrom. I'm a rural forester with the Nebraska Forest Service through the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, and my office is in O'Neill, Nebraska. Someone is sitting in the shade of a tree because sometime in the past, another person planted that tree. That is a famous quote from Warren Buffett, a great Nebraskan. So today we're going to be talking about a tree that is dear to my heart. Every forester has their favorite, and this is one of my favorites. This tree is scientifically called Quercus. It is known to live over 500 years and can live in just about any type of environment, from wet to dry, cold to hot, and anything in between. I'm talking about the oak. And the reason I chose the quote is because it says a long time ago, and some people equate that it takes a long time to grow an oak tree. And it doesn't. I'm going to prove to you today that there are some oak trees that grow somewhat fast. Not as fast as a cottonwood, but not as slow as a slug. So join me today as we go and look at different oaks. And that brings me to my first oak, the bur oak. The bur oak, Quercus macrocarpa, is native to Nebraska. In fact, it's one of the few vegetative species that has a long range of area. It ranges from the panhandle of Florida all the way up to Canada and everywhere in between. It is a Nebraska native, and it is proud to be a Nebraska native. Now in the fall it may not go big red, but it does go yellow, and it does have wonderful acorns. You may be wondering, why would I plant something with acorns in my yard? If you have squirrels, if you have wildlife, those acorns are not going to be found. Wildlife love the acorns, and most of the time before they hit the ground they're already gone. Another great thing about the bur oak is it does take long to establish, but what you don't see is that underneath in the root system it is growing those roots, establishing a good taproot. Once the taproot is established, it starts to grow up. It doesn't grow as fast as the cottonwood, as I said before, but it still grows pretty good at about 5 to 6 inches a year. So it's one to consider. Now, it's also one for a big space. This big boy can actually grow up to 70 feet tall and grow even taller. How wide does it get from tip to tip? You're talking about 60 feet. So make sure you have a good space. And I should point out, another reason I like oaks is because they have so many different varieties. There are shrubs and there are trees. Bur oak, for one, is a tree. So the next Quercus, or oak, that I want to introduce to you is kind of quirky in its own way. It's called the swamp white oak. And don't let the name fool you. Just because it has swamp in the name doesn't mean that it has to be in a wet area. This guy can grow in dry or wet, but prefers to be in moist soils. And I should have mentioned this before, oaks are divided into two groups, white oaks and red oaks. The bur oak and the swamp white oak are white oaks. They're in the white oak family. Scientific name for swamp white oak is Quercus bicolor. So where does the bicolor, or two colors, come from? The reason it's called bicolor is because it has two colors on the leaves. The leaf is nice and green on top, and underneath it's kind of a white or a gray color. And the one way you can identify bicolor, Quercus bicolor, or swamp white oak, is the velvet or the pubescence of the underleaf. This is not native to northeast Nebraska, but as you can see, it does rather well here. In fact, we're starting to put it into more of our windbreaks. You will also see this guy growing in a lot of arboretums and starting to see it in nurseries, so you can purchase this as well. Now, it does have an acorn, and remember when I said that sometimes these guys can grow a little faster? Swamp white oak will start to produce acorn about 7 to 10 years down the road, compared to bur oak that's just usually about 10 to 15. So think about swamp white oak. It's the medium cousin to the bur oak. It gets probably about 40 to 50 feet tall and about that wide. So it doesn't need as big of an area to cover when it's planted. So this is a good one to consider, and it's a little swampy at times. Now let's talk about one tree that is not native to Nebraska and is actually native to the lake states. Mead Hills oak, or sometimes called the northern pin oak. This one is called Quercus ellipsosolidus, and it gets its name because of its elliptical leaves. And if you look at the leaves, you'll notice that they are more like a red leaf or a red oak. So it's in the red oak family. It has sharp, pointy ends. This tree may not be native here, but it's sure doing it well being introduced. We're seeing more and more of these trees. And the cool thing about it is it does not get iron chlorosis. Southern pin oak, or just pin oak, does get iron chlorosis, or what we would call in humans, anemia. It doesn't get enough iron. So with this guy, we actually see enough iron is in our soils, and it does very well. This tree can also tolerate higher pH levels. And that is a good thing, especially up here in Nebraska. If you're in northeast Nebraska or north central Nebraska, that makes a huge difference. So we're going to look at our final oak tree, and that is the northern red oak, which is native to northeast Nebraska. And if you look at the leaves, you'll notice it is pointed at the end, so it is in the red oak family, obviously. Now, when you go to select your red oak, make sure you go with the northern red oak. It's a little hardier and can handle our winters. If you go with the southern red oak, you may not be impressed with what you see. So the northern red oak is native, like I mentioned before, and it gets its name because in the fall it gets a beautiful red color. It is also kind of anemic at times, so if it becomes where the leaves are yellow and the veins are still a dark green, all you have to do is add an iron supplement and read the directions. Northern red oak is found usually on higher ground. It doesn't like to be wet, it likes to be high and dry. This guy is kind of the cousin to the bur oak. It does not get as tall, it does not get as wide. It usually gets about 40 to 50 feet tall, maybe 60 in some cases, and it's about that wide. So a northern red oak is a good one. So we didn't talk about all the oak species. I mean, who has time for 500 plus species? And oaks can be funny. They can be quirky again, because they can actually cross with each other. A bur oak and a red oak will cross with each other. So then you have all the hybrids and varieties. And there are some good hybrids and varieties to check out. So think the next time you're thinking about buying a new tree, think about an oak. Because remember, an oak is just an acorn that stood its ground.